I'm sitting down today with Blanca Bernal. Blanca is Spanish in origin, but she lives in the US and has for many years. And Blanca is a carbon scientist who works with windrock and is a specialist in particular in wetlands. So I'm going to be talking to Blanca today about her current job, but also something that she did that was pretty amazing with a program called Homeward Bound, and also about a book that she's just written. So there's got a lot of interesting things to talk about. So welcome to the show, Blanca.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Blanca, so you're a carbon scientist. Can you just perhaps tell us what is a carbon scientist?
Well, it could be several different things. In my case, is looking at how carbon cycles work in the ecosystems and how carbon goes from the atmosphere to the land, to the soil, to the plants, and then back out to the atmosphere as greenhouse gases and pollution and so on. So the part that I work on is the capture of that carbon from the atmosphere into the plant biomass and into the soil, and seeing how different ecosystems are better than others, are doing it more efficient, let's say, than others are doing that, so they can be used as a tool to mitigate climate change.
And so which ecosystems are better?
Well, tree biomass is very efficient in storing carbon just because the trees grow more than, for example, than grasses. And in general, as an ecosystem, wetlands are very good capturing carbon because they capture the carbon and they keep it stored in the soil. They have typically carbon-rich soils with carbon that is accumulating over centuries and millennia, and it stays on the ground because they have standing water during part of the year. So the carbon just gets in and gets locked for a while. And so that's why they are efficient in sequestering carbon, is what it said.
And how did you become a carbon scientist? What was your thinking? What was all your motivations in doing that?
Well, it kind of evolved over time. When I went to grad school, I came to the US and I started working with a professor that was one of the leading scientists on a concept that is called environmental engineering or ecological engineering. So what that does is focusing on how to preserve, restore, and manage ecosystems and nature in general to provide ecosystem services that are good for the environment and for human societies. So it's how to design these ecosystems in a way that they keep on being natural, but continue giving these services. And carbon sequestration is one of the ecosystem services that wetlands provide. So I started to get interested in that idea of ecological engineering and learning more about climate change and carbon sequestrations, and I just got motivated by that whole world and that whole science in there, because it's wetlands are very tricky ecosystems. The fact that they have water part of the year makes the biogeochemistry and the functioning of the ecosystem more complex than other more stable ecosystems, like, let's say, for example, a forest or a grassland. Those are more stable. Wetlands are very dynamic, and they have all these incredible functions that improve water quality. They are a huge biodiversity habitat. They are productive ecosystems, and so on. So they have a lot of different functions, and capturing carbon is really just one of them. But it's an important one in the context of climate change and mitigation.
So how do you actually go about measuring how much carbon a wetland is capturing?
Well, if you do the estimation of the soil, which is the main component on the wetland, well, the thing about wetlands is that there are many types of wetlands. You have wetlands with trees, wetlands with grasses, and wetlands without much standing vegetation. So in the ones that have trees, you will have to measure the trees. But in general, you always have to measure the carbon in the soil. And that's a matter of taking soil cores and measuring the carbon content but also measuring how old the soil is. So that way you can estimate the rate of accumulation of carbon over time and see how efficient the ecosystem or the conditions of that wetland, that type of wetland, are compared to others. Because you can have this much of soil and carbon, but you don't know how old it is, right? This could have accumulated in 100 years, in 1,000 years. So that metric of putting an age to the soil is relevant for these cases. In the case of trees, it's easier because you can see a tree grow. You plant a tree, a sapling, and then over time you measure how tall they get, how thick the trunk gets, and so on. So that's easier to measure.
And so then you can just, if you take the example of a tree, do you know that if a tree grows to be a 10 centimeter diameter, for example, that tree would have captured, that constitutes a certain amount of carbon? Is that how it works?
Right, because it's the growth of the tree is an increment in biomass. Biomass is made out of carbon. It's made out of many different things, but half of biomass on average is carbon. So you can estimate by calculating how much biomass increases over time, you can directly calculate how much carbon increases over time. And then you can have these conversions of, okay, this much carbon is equivalent to this much CO2. And because it's through the growth of the tree that the tree grows, because it does photosynthesis, which means taking the CO2 from the atmosphere. So it's literally capturing it from the atmosphere and converting in biomass. You can calculate how much over a certain number of years you have captured from the atmosphere as CO2. And the older your trees are, or the more mature your forest is, the more biomass you're building up and the more carbon you're sequestering from the atmosphere. So, and that's why for trees, because it's relatively simple and straightforward, that's why there are now so many policies and initiatives to preserve forests and restore forests as a way to mitigate climate change, because you can counteract the emissions that countries produce from fossil fuels, from whatever energy production and so on. And so that balances out. By capturing, you can offset part of your emissions. So there's a number of policies that incentivize forest restoration and reforestation and avoiding deforestation. So all those things that keep current forest protected and increase the forest area.
And are they the same sort of policies for wetlands? Are people as concerned about wetlands as they are about forests?
That is starting to be more important now. Like I said, wetlands are more complex because they are more dynamic. So it's, in a way, it's slightly more difficult to predict how much carbon you are capturing, because it's not as thin a tree growing. It's more difficult to measure. It's more variable because it depends on different factors. Like a forest has tree biomass, but a wetland can have trees, can have grasses. It's not the same if it's in a cold climate or in a temperate climate or in a tropical climate. Wetlands also, if they can have fresh water or salt water or brackish water. So that also affects how the carbon cycles in the soil. For example, freshwater wetlands emit methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. So you have that balance that you have to make between how much you're capturing as CO2, but also how much you're emitting as methane. But now the wetlands that are getting more relevance are coastal wetlands, because thanks to the salt water, the saline conditions, they don't emit methane, or they barely emit methane. So it's all captured. So they are really efficient at sequestering carbon both in the soil and in the biomass. If they have the trees, for example, mangrove wetlands, mangroves are forested wetlands, really are swamps. And they are super efficient at capturing carbon because of that. They get all the benefits of being a forest and a wetland, and none of the caveats of producing methane. Plus, they have all these other benefits about coastal resilience, abating coastal storms, the impact of the storms. They counteract sea level rise because they accumulate so much carbon. Really, they accrete so much soil that they can keep up with the pace of sea level rise. So yes, that part is starting to gain a lot of importance.
So in your everyday job, what do you actually do in terms of wetlands? Are you going out and visiting wetlands? Are you measuring the amount of carbon that a particular wetland is putting out, or what do you actually do?
Well, it depends. I used to do more field work, more wetland work before I started at Windrock. Because so in Windrock, what I do is a lot of data analysis and a lot of some field work as well. But the main part of my job is to provide support to governments, organizations, or companies, or all different kinds of stakeholders to help them make a sustainable management of their natural resources and make land use decisions that help them improve their climate mitigation policies and their strategies on how to manage the land and how to use basically the land more sustainably and the resources more sustainably. And all that is focused in ecosystem services, mostly on carbon, just because of all these policies that I was telling you that exist now that provide incentives to people, to governments, or to companies to increase the forest ecosystems, the area, and the richness of carbon within the forest that they already have as a tool to mitigate climate change. So in all these inventories of the gases that the countries or the companies produce, and the strategies to mitigate their emissions and the contributions to climate change. So what I'm mostly doing there is either produce methodologies or protocols or tools or data analysis that support the decision making on how to approach these issues and how to manage these ecosystems in a way that the information is out there, data is out there, but it's often not easy to understand unless you are a specialist on that topic, right? And policymakers have to make decisions no matter what, and they need this information, and they need to be able to understand the data and the scientific information that is out there. And there's no doubt that decisions about sustainability and about natural resource management and climate change, they should be based in science to be effective. So in this work, what we try to do is make all that information, all that scientific information, package it in a way that is more approachable and more useful for these people that make those decisions, either by data analysis simplifying results or simplifying information or making it more accessible, or by doing protocols, guidelines, methodologies that help them make those measurements themselves, or produce those results themselves, or analyze that data that they already have, or again, the decision support tools that help them guide their decision making.
So your role is I mean, it sounds to me as though your role is absolutely critical in making sure that you're acting as a translator. So you're translating raw scientific material into material that decision makers can use to be making science, properly based scientific decisions. So
yeah, it's pretty much
that. Yeah. And now, can you tell me a bit about the Homeward Bound program?
Yes.
And I was reading the website this morning of the Homeward Bound program, and I thought, just in preparation for talking to you, and I was just blown away because it was I think the slogan is something like
Mother Nature needs her daughters.
Mother Nature needs her daughters, which I think is so. I think that's a fabulous slogan, and it's so much. It's also so much what I'm trying to do in this podcast is have women who are speaking up about things that are really important to them, and getting a more balanced leadership of men and women, so that we're having more and hopefully a more nurturing way of making decisions and dealing with climate and all those things. So just tell me about, how did you get involved in the Homeward Bound project?
Um, well, let's see. So I joined the program 2 years ago, and let me start from the beginning. So the Homeward Bound program is an initiative that selects 100 women every year over 10 years with the intention of having, after 10 years, 1,000 women that are better prepared to take on leadership roles and to lead on decision making, especially for decisions that involve the sustainability and the well-being of the planet, like treating the planet as a home and taking care of it. And the point of doing that is that women are half of the population of the world, but they are not part of the decision-making process. They're rarely at the table when decisions are being made, and for a number of reasons that, if you want, we can get into. But that is the principle of Homeward Bound. Like, women are prepared; they can take on these roles. They are good leaders. Studies show that they don't lack the capacity of making decisions or taking on leadership roles. It's just a matter of how society now is structured and biased. But they sometimes face these barriers that are difficult to overcome, and that is what is keeping them from achieving those roles. Some of them women can do something about, and others is going to take more to change. And so what Homeward Bound does is select these 100 women every year and give them the tools and the connections and the equipment, let's say, to be better prepared to face those barriers and overcome them and work together for a common goal that is the well-being and the sustainability of the planet. The way I got involved in this is because a friend told me about it. I actually didn't know about the program. When I heard about it, it was the third year. So it was still pretty early on the 10-year process. Right now, they already selected the sixth year. And so I was part of the fourth cohort. And the program is a 1-year remote set of classes, workshops, and formation. It's a remote program for over a year, for over 11 months. And then the 12th month of the year, you get together with all the participants of your cohort, because we're all over the world. You get together in Argentina, and we go to Antarctica for a month, for 3 weeks. Yeah. And so I was there last November. And the idea of going to Antarctica is because, Antarctica was a place that didn't allow women to be there because it was deemed to be too dangerous and whatever other reason, but it was a reflection of the glass ceiling, right? So if you bring all of a sudden 100 women to Antarctica, it's a symbol of women breaking the glass ceiling in a way. And actually, the time that I went, it was the largest women-only expedition ever to go to Antarctica. So it's pretty big. So it's a way to give visibility to the program itself, but also to the leadership of the participants, to the fact that there are still barriers that we have to break as women and overcome, and also give visibility to Antarctica because it's one of the continents where climate change is most evident. Little changes in temperature have huge loop and feedback effects, and just a little decrease in the ice in Antarctica, for example, can have an impact on the rest of the world by increasing the sea level by meters. The fauna in Antarctica, even though it's far, far away, it makes a huge impact also in the cycling of the life in the ocean and the nutrient cycling in the ocean all over the world, just because of the way that some animals like whales they spend some time. Some of them spend some time in the Antarctic Sea, but then they go up, and then it's a whole cycle. They also, the difference in temperatures drives the currents of the oceans in the planet, and so on. So it has a role in many different aspects that drive the ecology and the natural functioning of the planet itself. And just little changes can break that balance very easily. And actually, now that I mentioned this, so after we went to Antarctica, we just got into the group of 100 women and started working on a proposal to protect the ocean in the peninsula Antarctica, with the idea that because right now it's overexploited with fisheries, it's very sensitive to climate change. It's also the one that is closest to the other continent, so it gets the most tourism. And it's very important to have that ocean protected as a marine protected area, just to make sure that we preserve that ecosystem. I mean, that won't stop climate change, but it will make impacts less dangerous, let's say. So that's something we're doing now as a group, this collective group of 100 women with the previous cohorts.
Tell me about so you flew down to Argentina and you got onto the boat. You'd never seen these women before. You'd seen them remotely. You'd never all met.
Just remotely, yeah. I met a few of them that were based in the US, and yeah. So actually, I think in person I only had met 2 or 3 before. So yeah, and then you got together with all of them, the 100 of them in Argentina. We are in Ushuaia for about a week to do the on the ground program, and then you get into the ship for 3 weeks, and we go down to the Antarctic Peninsula, and we visit them. One of the points is to visit the scientific bases that are in the peninsula, to get the interaction with the scientists there, understand how they are seeing the impacts of climate change over time, learn about the collaborative environment down there, because it's interesting that Antarctica is not, it doesn't belong to a single country. It's governed by many different countries in collaboration with the intention of promoting science and peace. And so that whole aspect is always embedded into the program, especially when you're down there. And we spend most of the time in the ship, because you cannot really be in the land for too long. Actually, you cannot have too many people at once in the same place, so we have to take turns.
You're not allowed to, or is it dangerous, or why can't you be
in the land? No, I mean, it's dangerous depending. If you get stranded down there, then it would be dangerous. But we are with people that know the place, that are experts in the area. So yeah, it's not something that you could really do on your own, because you can get there lost, and the snow is deep, but you can fall into some kind of deep hole. It's cold, and there's a lot of wildlife there that you have to respect. So there's this company, this organization. I'm sorry. The acronym is IATO, and they are the ones that control all the tourism and all the landings in Antarctica. Just because of that, because there are so many. It's such a delicate place that you have to follow these guidelines and make sure that you don't cross certain barriers. Otherwise, the consequences could be who knows. And you have to be careful. For example, there are things like you have to disinfect your boots before going into the land, because you can bring in invasive species of whatever kind, and whatever you bring to Antarctica is going to stay there. And we're starting to see grasses and moss in there that they weren't there before, just because, well, first, climate change, because it's getting warmer, and second, because people bring them in their clothes, or you don't really know what you're bringing. So there's this protocol of disinfecting everything to make sure that you don't leave anything behind that wasn't there before. All these kinds of things.
Sounds a bit like COVID.
Now it does, yes.
And so what did you on the ship going down, what were you actually doing?
That month down there was part of the intensive portion of the program in terms of learning. So it was pretty much classes all day. We had the 3 weeks structure to complete the formation that the program gives you, and to produce to promote the collaboration between the participants. So we had the day structure into different lectures during the day, different workshops, setting up working groups to start building up collaboration depending on the background of the women that are there and the interests. If the weather allowed, we will have landings in the afternoon or in the evening, and there was always a plan, but you also had to be very flexible depending on weather and depending on how people were feeling. If you were in the calm seas in the peninsula, that was fine. But the moment that you were a little bit farther out into the ocean, even if it was just a little bit, if it was windy, the boat moves a lot, so people start getting dizzy. So it was very interesting, but at the same time, it was also intense. I mean, you feel that you are in class constantly and having all this. Getting stimulated constantly either by the place that you're in or the things that you're learning or the people that you're with, because the group of women are really an incredible group of people. So you just get motivated by all this, and by the end of the day, you're really tired.
Not surprised.
but it's great. The next day you want to do more of it, and then it's over, and it feels like it was too short. But yeah.
And what sort of things were you learning? What sort of things does the project teach you?
A lot of it is about strategic planning, how to understand better what you want and how to accomplish it, and kind of learning how to make a plan that gets you to that point where you want to be, but also how to adapt to the different conditions and unexpected outcomes. We learn a lot about leadership in general, with the different experience that the faculty and the invited. There's the core faculty of the program, and then every year there's an invited faculty member that tells you about their own experience. So in my year, we had Musimbi Cañoro, and she was telling us about the Women Foundation that she has, and how to empower women in all around the world, and how to move those programs forward. The year before, they had Cristina Figueres, which was the architect of the Paris Agreement, and so on. So you learn from those like invited
the guests,
faculty.
Guests, yeah.
Yes. And then you learn a lot about Antarctica as well, and how that is, like I was saying before, is key for the well-being of the planet, and how to. You also learn about visibility and how to establish how to use your visibility for a purpose, not just to be visible. And you get practice on delivering messages, be more efficient in how you express yourself, how you explain things, how you get to the point, how to use visuals and so on. So a lot of different components of understanding what you want, what do you need to achieve it, and the tools to do so, and the context of doing so.
Wow. And how did you feel like going on the program changed you?
It's interesting because it's a slow change, I think, because a lot of the things that you learn, you can soak them in, but until you put them in practice, you don't really start learning them, I'd say. So I definitely think the program has changed me. I don't know if it's really it's probably the combination of everything, right? It's not just the formation that we receive. It's just it's also being with all those women. And I think that is the most important thing that has made a difference in me, because it's putting together people that are well prepared and they have the same interests. And I mean, basically, we all want a better world. So it's just seeing how we can do it, right? And how to make that little difference. And I think that is what has changed me the most. The fact that after you leave Antarctica, you're still in touch with women. Some collaborations already start within the ship, but some others start later. And you start kind of finding what you want to, like your own personal goal, and how to be more efficient at making that happening. And I mean, at a personal level, I've always been very shy and very try to stay in the second or in the back line and not being seen and stuff. And that is something that I've been trying to change. Just thinking about, well, I mean, this message is important, or this mission is important, or I think this is valuable, or and try to move towards that. Like, okay, this is kind of a pain for me to do, but I will do it because I believe in the outcome, and I believe in putting one step after the next one until the goal is accomplished, and making a little difference in that way. So yeah, you do a lot of thinking about how you function and how you make your own decisions. And sometimes, I mean, it's easier to blame everybody else about the things that happen to you, but a lot of that is due to the way that you make your own decisions as well. So working on that. So yeah, it's difficult to pinpoint one single thing. It's just trying to do things better, understanding what for you better means.
Yeah, what I can hear is it sounds to me as though it's for you it was getting clarity on what was important to you, and also giving you courage to say, well, it is so important for me that even though I feel a little bit nervous or a little bit shy, I'm prepared to stand up and be visible, and to talk about the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
And that is just exactly what this podcast is all about. And that's why it's called Brave New Women, because I think it takes courage to stand up and speak about the things that are important to us.
Yeah, for sure.
So bravo. And you said that there were some projects that started on the ship. There were collaborations since you've been on the ship. Can you tell me about some of those?
Yeah, one that started during the ship was the one that I mentioned about the marine protected area, that just the group, the leading group that was doing that, just published an article in Nature, actually, and all that is because there's this week and next week there's this group of global leaders that are getting together and deciding how to manage a different number of resources. But one of the things is deciding what marine areas can get the category of marine protected area. So that is one thing that started in the ship, and just now starting to get a lot of visibility, just in line with this convention that is happening now. The other thing that came out of the program is that with the other Spanish participants in previous years and in my year, we created an organization in Spain for women that want to empower women in the careers of science and in leadership and in decision making. So kind of taking the idea of Homeward Bound and putting women in Spain together with these same kinds of interests, and carrying out projects and initiatives that aim to that goal, like gender equality and women leadership, and support the importance of science in decision making. And most recently, from that group, a subset of us got together and wrote a kids' book about viruses. And so it was not just me, it was the 6 of us. And I actually have it here. It just came out last week in Spain, or 2 weeks ago.
Last week, wow.
And it's called The Secret Life of Viruses. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's The Secret Life of Viruses. And actually, it just came out in Spanish and in Catalan, and is now also in French. It's a lot of different languages. So we have in French, in English, in Polish, in Dutch. It's coming out in Russian, in Chinese, in Korean. I'm probably leaving languages behind. So that was incredible. Really, the success it is. And the good thing about this book, I mean, it's timely because it's about the virus. So it has like friendly drawings and explanations of things. So it's a way to make kids and grown-ups understand that viruses are everywhere and not all of them are bad. I mean, now we have the pandemic with the coronavirus, but viruses also have a role in making this world function. And it's important to understand that if you want to keep your own self healthy, you also have to keep the planet healthy. So it tells you about those things like, okay, some viruses are bad, others are not, and how you can help others in making sure that they don't get sick, and how to protect the planet, and so on. So it gives you, with simple terms and entertaining drawings, an idea of what they are, how they function, what they do, and stuff like that.
And if people want to get hold of the book, how can they find it?
I can share with you the links of the ones that are out, because how this worked is that the Spanish and the Catalan one are already out, and they are in the website. This is the editorial in Sauri. I can send you links later. But then every language is every version in another language is made by editorials in other countries. For example, the French one is done by the French editorial. The English one is done by the English editorial. So they have their own sites to sell that, and you can find it also in bookstores. Yeah, I know they are in Europe. I don't know how long it would take to jump to other continents, but they're in several languages already in different countries in Europe.
Wow. Blanca, I finished these interviews with 2 questions. The first question is, what has your experience of work been as a woman? Has that been a factor in your working life, either positive or negative?
The effect of being a woman
has that made a difference to you to be a woman?
I mean, positive or negative, it depends on what you look at, I'd say. Overall, it's clear that you have barriers and biases to face, and some are imposed on yourself just by things that you see and things that they tell you since you're a little kid. And others are just new things that come your way as you progress in your life and as you grow up. So that's definitely there, especially coming from a scientific background, which still in most of the disciplines, it is a highly male-dominated world. And I mean, that has advantages and disadvantages, right? Because in a way, you have a harder time doing it, and in some cases, you have real trouble facing, all these barriers and attacks and whatnot. I mean, it can get really ugly. But at the same time, you're also, if you're able to overcome them, you also come out stronger, and hopefully you become better prepared for whatever comes next, although, who knows. But yeah, so definitely that is there, and you learn to live with that. And if you're able to, you fight it, and if sometimes you can't. So that is really a matter of the place that you're in, of the strength that you have, and the support also that you have, because these things really take more than one to change. And sometimes if you challenge the system, it's never easy, and you definitely need support, at least, if not in the workplace, at least in your own personal life to to remind you to stay strong and to stay motivated and to think about what matters and not get down by all the things that people may tell you.
Have you had any personal experiences of difficulties at work as a woman, or especially if you're in a scientific community where there's a lot of men?
Yeah, I would say the most thing that I experience is that having people not trusting that you can do things and that you are not worthy of what you're doing, and sometimes even not listening to you and plainly calling you stupid, and then you come out and show that what you were saying was not stupid and actually made sense. And then when you start achieving things, then you get people coming to you like, well, what did you do to make this happen? Like, there's always this question like, this couldn't be just you. What kind of help did you get? And you get that from men and from women, right? So it's just this constant erosion
of confidence.
Yes. And so there's this thing about having what is called imposter syndrome, and men and women have it, especially in academia, because it's super competitive. It's a brutal career, really. I mean, I'm sure others have their challenges as well, but in academia, you're always placed in a position where, regardless of the gender, of this uncomfortable ground where you never know enough about something, and it's never good enough because you always have to be pushing barriers. And it's this feeling constantly, this need of improving yourself and overachieving, really. And it's really too much. And of course, people make it, and they are stellar scientists, and that's how science progresses. I mean, it's clear that in this field, like in many others, we need the best of the best. But the system is really favoring this kind of biases and challenges, and then you see cases of people just making up numbers because they cannot stand the pressure, and they need to show that they make progress, and so that's challenging. And if on top of that you are a minority, could be gender, could be race, could be social status, it doesn't matter. There's always this thing of like, first, it's going to be harder for you. Second, people are going to doubt that you can do it. And then when you do it, people are going to doubt that you actually did it. So it's just full of shocks.
I mean, it sounds like the system is completely the contrary of what you would expect. If you wanted people to be relaxed and interested and motivated and diving deep into their subjects, it sounds like the system has been, the way it's been created is exactly the opposite of that.
I mean, in a way, yeah, it also has its good things, right? I mean, it's obvious that the groups that are more productive and more innovative are the ones that collaborate and that have diverse groups of people and different ideas and different ways to approach the same thing, but thinking outside the box. And in a way that is done, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily the way it's not promoted, really. I mean, like in every other job, you have the grants and the fellowships for diversity or for minorities, but they are there because they are not common in the area, right? You have those policies and those grants and those fellowships because there are not enough of those, and everybody knows that they are necessary because you have to think creatively, and otherwise it's a lot of people doing the same thing and thinking the same way. So in a way that is fostered, but the higher you get into the good universities, into the good institutions, into the more renowned group, the more challenging it is in that way, because it is very competitive and you have to be the best of the best. And a lot of the times, the way that we see, well, most of the time, the way that we see leadership is not me and my group, it's me and just me and individual leadership. It's not just in science, everywhere we tend to promote more the individual, the lone wolf and the superstar and the superhero rather than the collective success.
Mm.
So this just shows how the world works.
Yeah, yeah. And I can imagine that one of the things that the Homeward Bound project is working on is changing that, and to say, well, perhaps the way that women work more than men is in groups and collaboratively, and that we're much stronger together than just the superstar or the lone wolf.
Yes, no, that's definitely one of the aspects of women leadership. They're definitely more collaborative. They have this legacy mindset. Not that men don't have it, but women have it more. They are more inclusive, and they're always more looking into the well-being of the group rather than the pointing out of just one single leader. And so that makes a difference. Maybe decisions are slower, but they are more robust and more resilient when they include more women because of that.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, Blanca, is the last question that I ask is, if you had a message for the people who are listening, what would that message be?
I think the message would be to figure out what is important for you and what motivates you, and try to pursue that despite the challenges. Because we all can do many different things, and we're everybody with the right opportunities and and given a chance can do great things, but we're going to be most likely better at what keeps us motivated than at what we just do because we have to do it. So finding that and going after it despite the challenges, I think that will be my recommendation, whether it is in your personal life or at work, or this wild dream of I want to be an astronaut, then just do that. And also that I think there's no thing too small to go after, really. I'm thinking now in particular about this whole the whole issue of climate change that is so massive and so difficult to put into a perspective of what can I do as an individual, right? Some people feel overwhelmed about it because it seems too big to tackle. But that is a good example to show that, yes, there's things that have to be done at the institutional level and big things, but there are so many small things that you can do at your own personal level. Tiny things that make a difference. It's not just one more drop in the bucket, but the moment that you have too many drops, you have an ocean. So it's just setting up that chain of reaction. If that is what is important to you, just the small things count.
No, that's a great message. Blanca, I suppose I come away from this interview just so impressed, actually. So impressed that with you and with your dedication to science and with your dedication to trying to make the world a better place, doing that in a scientific-based way, in a career that's not easy and not easy for a woman. And I think the Homeward Bound project just sounds extraordinary. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about the different collaborations that come out of that. And the more I do this podcast, the more I hear of groups of women that are actually getting together, changing things. And I think that the more that we can do that, the quicker that we can do that, the better the world will be. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's been fantastic.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.